The main thing is, if people are already in the US, they are probably not going to have to go through the fee payment process if they are selected in the H-1B lottery next year through a change of status from F1, which is amazing news for all of the international students in the US. The fee does apply to people who are going to come from other countries into the US on their initial H-1B through next year's lottery. So demand may decrease. So for those international students concerned about getting a job after they graduate, maybe they'll actually have better chances now of being selected, ironically, when all is said and done, although it's, I'm sure, been very stressful for many people in that situation. But there might be a silver lining here for those that are studying in the States. But, it could also be attorneys in USCIS who read the law and analyzed the proclamation and who are making sure that to the greatest extent, the law is being followed. The fact is, this is a nation built because of immigrants, and we do have a viable, functioning immigration system. People are getting approvals all the time. You just don't hear those success stories as headlines because they're not as interesting. So you do need a thick skin if you're going to be an immigrant in the United States.
Hello and welcome back to the HT podcast. I'm your host, Shashank Mattoo, reporting to you from Washington, D.C. If you're an Indian student in the United States, you've just received some good news from the US government. It has relaxed its implementation rules for the new $100,000 H-1B visa hike. What exactly are these rules? How do they impact Indian professionals and students in the United States? Joining me, of course, to talk about this is Sophie Alcorn of Alcorn Immigration Law. It's a Silicon Valley-based law firm. And of course, Sophie is someone I've been turning to a great deal as immigration has become such a hot topic in the United States over the last couple of weeks and months. Sophie, good to see you again. It's been a month since our last chat. Could I just ask you something just to begin with? We've seen the US government release these new rules that have relaxed the new $100,000 H-1B visa hike rules for some particular types of people. Could you tell us a little bit about that? What is this relaxation about?
Well, it's a very strict interpretation of the president's words, and they clarified who does and who does not need to pay that fee. They provided a payment mechanism. So if somebody would like to pay the government $100,000, there's now a payment link to be able to do so. And they've created a process via email, interestingly, for companies to request exceptions. But the main thing is, if people are already in the US, they are probably not going to have to go through the fee payment process if they're selected in the H-1B lottery next year through a change of status from F1, which is amazing news for all of the international students in the US. The fee does apply to people who are going to come from other countries into the US on their initial H-1B through next year's lottery. But what we've been seeing for several weeks is that people are getting approved with their H-1B transfers, extensions, concurrence, amendments if they already had H-1Bs in the past. And even people who are doing a change of status from another non-immigrant status like O3 or maybe H4 to a cap exempt H-1B, which is an H-1B without the lottery, they have also been getting approved. So this is that fuller clarification of all the nitty-gritty details of how they're applying it in every particular circumstance that we've been waiting for.
Right. Sophie, I want to focus on the question of the students because, when the $100,000 H-1B visa hike came in, most of the people that I was talking to, students especially, were saying that, look, this is the end of the road for us because we're going to take on entry-level jobs once we leave university in the United States. No one is going to pay $100,000 to sponsor us. For these people, it seems that if you're transitioning from an F1 student visa to an H-1B visa, you don't have to pay that visa hike fee. Is that correct?
That's correct. It says that the proclamation does not apply to a petition filed after 9/21/25 that is requesting a change of status for an alien inside the United States where it is granted. Now, if you've had maintenance of status issues and you can't demonstrate that you were maintaining your STEM OPT, for example, with 3 recent pay stubs, and they would decline a change of status and make you leave and do consular processing with a visa stamp and then come back in, then that would subject you to the $100,000 fee. So it's really critical now that every student, if you haven't already done so, be very meticulous about maintaining your status, compliance, counting any days of unemployment on OPT and STEM OPT, making sure you're being paid regularly, fulfilling the requirements of your I-983 STEM OPT training plan. Just make sure that, everything, all your ducks are in a row. But then that should allow your future employers to petition for you, which is great.
Right. Sophie, a question that I wanted to ask was that a lot of people, and I'm asking you because you work in Silicon Valley, you work very closely with tech companies, with Indian professionals specifically. A lot of folks who were thinking about, for example, coming to the United States and studying were telling me that, look, if you can't work on an H-1B after studying in the United States, the degrees are too expensive to justify. Does this recent relaxation address a lot of those concerns? Someone like you who's been, who works closely with Indian talent, people who come to study in US universities, then get jobs in Silicon Valley. Does this address the concerns of those people who were thinking of studying in the United States, were holding off because they were unsure about the visa situation? Does this address that concerns?
I think so. And we'll have to see how next year's lottery goes. We're still awaiting more details on that. And normally the portal doesn't open until February or March. And I'm sure the government is preparing for maybe additional, maybe they don't need to do it anymore, but maybe there will be additional guidance prior to the lottery. For example, do we need to pay the $100,000 fee before doing the registration process? A technical reading says here, payment must be made prior to filing a petition with USCIS. So technically, the lottery cap registration process is not the same as filing an I-129 H-1B petition. So hopefully you don't have to pay the fee to participate in the lottery. I think that's how that's going to play out, thank goodness. So people can still participate in the lottery. This means there might be much greater attrition of selected people who don't end up following through. And I think there's going to be less demand due to this, that now the H-1B is becoming a mechanism for people who have already committed to an education or another work visa in the States, but less so people coming here immediately from other countries. So demand may decrease. So for those international students concerned about getting a job after they graduate, maybe they'll actually have better chances now of being selected, ironically, when all is said and done, although it's, I'm sure, been very stressful for many people in that situation, but there might be a silver lining here for those that are studying in the States.
Right. Sophie, could I ask you to, because you've covered immigration very closely, what would have motivated the US government to make these changes? Is it businesses coming out and putting pressure on them? We've seen the US Chamber of Commerce, which is, of course, a very influential business body, has actually sued the US government on the $100,000 H-1B visa hike. There's also a lot of civil society organizations that have actually filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration. What exactly is motivating this change, this relaxation for students who are trying to get on H-1B visas?
It's hard to say, and we may never know. I'm sure universities also, feel very strongly about providing pathways for their alumni to continue in the US after they graduate. It's hard to tell, but, it could also be attorneys in USCIS who read the law and analyzed the proclamation and who are making sure that to the greatest extent, the law is being followed, and maybe a fine reading of this to narrowly apply the proclamation is the best way to legally uphold it. So there could be a wide variety of motivators behind the scenes.
Right. So if I could also ask you about uncertainty. And that's something that has come up repeatedly. People that I speak to when I'm working on immigration stories are always saying that, look, what we don't understand is the fact that the rules change extremely quickly. We're not sure why the rules have changed. When this new $100,000 rule was announced, there was also this question about whether Indian professionals would have to rush back to the United States lest they face, restrictions on ports of entry. We saw the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick make certain statements about the H-1B visa program and how it would be changed. And then they had to walk back those statements. And now, of course, we've seen another set of changes that we just talked about. Of course, is a welcome change, but it all adds to this sense of uncertainty, not really being sure where the Trump administration wants to go with visas, wants to go with immigration. It seems there are hardliners. It seems there are more pro-immigration people within the administration. How do you advise people to make sense of this? Because when you talk to people, they just say that, look, we have no clue where the administration is going to be from month to month on the question of immigration. And we're not really sure we want to bet our futures on the United States if we don't know what the administration is going to do tomorrow when it comes to immigration.
It's very understandable. It's a volatile environment. And, the president is taking the steps that he believes in to protect Americans. And whatever your stances are on those issues, the fact is that we are in a volatile environment. And I commonly advise people that the one thing that you can expect is change. And so it's not right for everybody to come here or stay here in this environment. So I would urge people who are thinking about coming here for the first time, to consider that deeply. There's a lot of wonderful reasons to be here. It's an amazing country. We'll have a lot of opportunities here. But it does require that grit and determination to navigate the system the way it is. Now, for those who are already here, I meet so many people every day who have dedicated their blood, sweat, and tears to this country, innovation, our technology infrastructure, really changing the world with advancing, new innovations that we're seeing and using every day. And they believe in American values. They put down roots, had kids here, bought homes here. And so for them, the stakes are quite high. And they're extremely committed to doing whatever it takes to find a way to live here and work here legally for the duration. So I think for each person, it's an individual cost benefit analysis. Nobody can predict that for another person. But for those who do have it in their hearts to make their way here and contribute to this nation, there are legal pathways to do so. But you have to have that ingenuity and perseverance to be able to understand and navigate the system.
Right. Sophie, I think it's been over a month since we had that interview. I think we did the podcast. It was midnight here. I think it must have been 9 p.m. for you when the original presidential proclamation, the $100,000 visa fee hike came in. I remember, so a very late night interview for both of us. And it's been over a month since. You, of course, are very plugged into Silicon Valley. You're talking to people in tech, also a lot of Indian talent. What's the mood now in terms of the mood on hiring, in terms of how companies are feeling, in terms of how professional talent is feeling about the Trump administration's proclamation that was made last month, about the visa fee hike, as well as its other moves on immigration?
We've actually had a lot of companies retain us for next year's H-1B lottery in the last month, even with the uncertainty. And I've had a lot of aspiring startup founders retain us for them to be able to get part-time H-1Bs to work at their own companies or transfer their H-1Bs to their own startups. The rules are actually quite welcoming now of founder owner beneficiaries for H-1Bs. And so with the rise of AI, I've seen a lot of people interested in being able to, finally begin their entrepreneurial careers, especially because, green card backlogs and maybe the EB2 didn't move as fast as they had hoped, right? So they really want to move forward. I've also seen a number of companies, actively hiring, excited to offer immigration sponsorship. So whatever the general narrative is or trends, there's always exceptions. And there is a lot of economic activity happening in many sectors right now.
Right. So, Sophie, another question I wanted to ask was just more generally on the mood around immigration at this point in time in the United States. We've seen not just the Trump administration, but also people from outside the administration, senators who are talking about restricting work authorizations for students. There's a legislation that's pending in the Senate right now that will make it harder for students, foreign students especially, to find work while they're studying. It's also going to make it harder for them to get on OPT visas. There has been this claim, especially among more conservative members of the US political elite, that, foreign students are coming here, they're using these OPT visas, they're abusing these systems, and this is hurting, American students, American workers. And that, again, is contributing to a lot of fear among Indian students, among Indian professionals, that really this is the beginning of the end of the Indian American dream as it existed before. What is your view? And what is your, let me say, advice to that?
I come back to, what is in your heart. It might not be the same path for everybody. It might be more challenging than it was before, but the fact is, this is a nation built because of immigrants, and we do have a viable, functioning immigration system. People are getting approvals all the time. You just don't hear those success stories as headlines because they're not as interesting. So you do need a thick skin if you're going to be an immigrant in the United States. This country demands a lot of you. Not just in terms of meeting the legal criteria to meet the requirements for visas and green cards, patience when it comes to the wait times, but also you have to be emotionally tough because there are a lot of different opinions on immigration. But many immigrants are happily, peacefully living in our communities and supporting our economy and, making lives here. So it is possible. But I would just consider individuals who are starting out on that path, especially students, to maybe consider their post-graduation path carefully. As you said, the H-1B opportunity has a large effect for people for after they graduate. But that isn't the only work visa opportunity. There are several other visas, and they allow you to work in different ways, create businesses, work in businesses, transfer amongst businesses. And so having a firm grasp, not only of your desired career path, but also how you might map out your own independent immigration journey while pursuing your career path from an early stage, I think needs to become part of the tool set. Because 10 years ago, when I started, the tech economy was hot. We were in the zero interest rate era. It was very easy for somebody to take out loans, come here, get a master's degree on F1, get selected in the H-1B lottery after 1 or 2 attempts, and then their corporate job would handle the perm immediately, and they were set. But especially with tech layoffs, that path doesn't always happen for people because layoffs can disrupt the perm process. So some people who got their jobs around 2020 are approaching their 6-year max out date for H-1B if they don't have an I-140 approved yet. So coming in with a clear green card strategy from the beginning, if you want to pursue an H-1B, at least being mindful about it is important. Now, it's also important to consider that on the F1 visa, you are not allowed to have immigrant intent. It is strictly a non-immigrant intent visa. So it's a lot to keep in mind all at once, but the more educated you become, the more you avail yourself of resources, information, education, just the way you would choose a STEM major instead of a non-STEM major. These are some of the things to begin thinking about early on.
Right. Sophie, my last question to you is it right to say that the impact of the H-1B visa fee hike, this big headline of $100,000 fee, is it now only going to apply to a fairly limited set of cases? Because we saw the Trump administration, when it first came in, actually announced the fee, but then also clarify that, wait, it's not annual, it's only going to be for fresh applications. Now, of course, they're saying that if you're transferring status, if you're a student and you're getting on an H-1B visa, you don't have to pay the fee. It's only for people who are applying for H-1B visas from outside the country in question. So would you say it's fair to say that as the days have gone by, the Trump administration has has relaxed the rules, made it much more targeted, and the fact that is now that this rule only impacts a fairly limited number of people now, this H-1B visa fee hike?
Well, maybe to the contrary, I think that President Trump has actually been quite consistent this whole time with his views on H-1Bs, even from his first administration, where he really wanted to put pressure on consulting companies to protect American workers. And viewed in that way, this proclamation basically affects the companies that hire international individuals on H-1B the most, which are primarily consulting companies. So this may decrease H-1B utilization by those companies quite significantly, reducing demand for H-1Bs. And then we see other changes coming that might increase the wages necessary for H-1Bs, as well as change the upcoming lotteries so that people with higher wage levels have more chances to be selected. So I think this is all actually part of a very consistent push by this administration. And the proclamation may have been potentially broad in how it was spoken or shared, and we were kind of missing some of the details at first. So we were all questioning what we should do for a little bit. But the way it's been refined, is in line with the president's original purpose there. So I'll be curious to see, how those effects end up playing out, what the numbers are for next year's lottery, and how the chances change for those who are already in the U.S.
Right. Sophie, I think that's an important point because I think in my conversations with folks who are in Silicon Valley, I think the biggest concern was people who are very fair-minded on the question of immigration have said that, look, President Trump has certain points, that there has been some abuse of the H-1B visa system. We do agree that needs to be combated, but the idea of the H-1B visa fee being hiked to $100,000 would also swamp out a lot of really, really good talent, entry-level talent that studied at the finest universities in the United States and then were trying to find jobs and wouldn't be able to because of the exceptionally high fees. But it seems that what the Trump administration has done is, as you were saying, refine the rules, made it much more targeted, much more limited to go after the particular kinds of consultancies and businesses that they were hoping to target in the first place. Hopefully, that policy remains stable and immigration remains reasonably open in the United States. But Sophie, thank you so much for your time. Again, a late night podcast for us on immigration news. That's just how it seems to be for us. But thank you again for joining us here on the HT podcast after talking to us about this.
Thank you so much for having me.